So I'm going to go a little bit different places with influence than our last speaker did. But today I'm talking about how to influence an industry. Now, for those of you who are not deeply steeped in the tech, which may not be that many, I will refer to the cloud. I do not mean the clouds. I mean the technology infrastructure that Amazon, Azure, and Google have a tendency to provide, as well as many others. And it's nothing more than someone else's computers. So we'll start with that. There's no such thing really as the cloud. It's really just other people's computers. So I will also talk about containers. These are not the containers I'm going to be speaking of. Containers in tech are a way to have a portable unit of software that is relatively new. It's about, well, no, it's not actually. It's not relatively new at all. It's been in Linux for almost 25 years. But it came into a large ascendancy with a company called Docker. So this was a way to store software and run software in the cloud, other people's computers, in a way that was more efficient. So if I talk about containers, it's not these, as we have all around the site here. It's a different type. It's a logical container. And then, of course, the framework that I'm using for this talk is Kubernetes, which is an open source project. And this project is about how to reason over thousands or perhaps even millions of those little containers, portable software units, running in the cloud in a way that makes it possible for people to deliver software to you that you use on your phone, on your computers, and so on. Now, this isn't a tech talk. I just needed to get that little basis of tech out of the way for you, though. So what I'm going to talk about is this project, this logo, this industry-changing movement that we created from this piece of software that allowed us to manage software on other people's computers. So what I am going to talk about are very human brains. I am going to talk about how people work together, how they develop software together, and how they do this in public as a performative art, for lack of a better description. When Kubernetes, as an open source project, was brought together and was made public by Google in 2015, there were probably 50 or so people that were working on this. So 2014, it was publicly launched. 2015, it made a 1.0 release. So in that first year, there were a very, very small number of humans working on this software. But they were doing it in the public on GitHub, another piece of software that is running in the cloud. Thus, I gave you all those definitions. So in building this piece of software, we do this collaboratively, and we did it in a way that ran across corporate boundaries. So this industry, the technology industry, hasn't moved because a single company said so in probably about 20 years. We tend to be a bit obstreperous. We tend to be a little bit recalcitrant. We tend to disbelieve in the big marketing pitches as individuals. So again, back to this single human brain. So what we needed to do to get this software project to be adopted by the entire industry, for reasons I won't get into, but I have publicly before, but we needed this software to be adopted everywhere, but we needed to move a lot of individual people who then as a group move the whole industry. So we talk about influence. This is my absolute favorite book about influence. Robert Cialdini has written this book. He wrote it, I want to say, in the late 70s. There are multiple versions. I believe this is the 5th edition. But he speaks of seven different hacks to use that make our brains really easy to influence. One of them is reciprocity. If I tend to give you a piece of candy, you're going to want to do something for me Doesn't matter whether you liked the candy or not, whether I handed you one of these wonderful tokens that I got at one of the workshops here, but you will have a tendency as a human to want to do something back. Social proof is another great influencing tactic. So I'm just going to run through these quick 7, and then I'll talk about how we use them in the Kubernetes community. Social proof is, look at all the other people who are doing this. Isn't it cool? They're talking about it on the Fediverse. We should pay more attention. Maybe we should go to EMF camp. Who's here because their timeline lit up one year about EMF camp somewhere, whether it was on some social? Yep, somebody's like, couple of you admit, yep. I'm here because someone said, oh, this is such a super cool event, you should go. So that's social proof. There's someone else that thinks this is a good idea, and for some reason I think that person has good ideas, so this must be a good idea. So I can attend here. Scarcity. Last one, who needs it? Last token. That's another good hack to get people to move. Unity. We want to pull people together and feel a part of something. I see that in this camp and in the way this community comes together. There's a sense of unity in, at some level, being an outsider here. I enjoy that bit of unity. Sympathy, and how we need to make sure that we are paying attention to how others feel. Codes of conduct give us good frameworks for a sympathy to help influence the way change happens in this community. Internal consistency is a little bit harder. If you make a choice and then someone, say, dissuades you or tries to dissuade you, you really want the choice, especially if it was a hard choice, to have been the right choice. So you can actually hack people by having them make a hard choice back to something, and then they will justify it themselves. And then, of course, one that we see a lot, but isn't used very often in the open source community, which is higher authority. So someone who has some power says so. These are all great hacks to influence people. So this book, fantastic book, I've read the last 2 versions cover to cover and found them hugely informative. But let's talk about how these things were employed in the open source community of Kubernetes. The first thing that we used a ton of was reciprocity. Now, in order to give something to someone that you don't know, one of the things, especially in a distributed community that doesn't have a lot of physical space, one of the first things you can offer is trust. The other thing that you can really offer easily is respect. And if you are offering those 2 non-tangibles to people who enter your community, they will automatically want to do good and participate in that community. So those 2 non-tangibles are a great founding point, especially because we know that humans are incredibly, incredibly messy. We are multifaceted, wonderful people who don't all think alike and who don't all understand how to come together in a meaningful way. And yet, if you offer trust and respect and leadership and guidance, you can bring together that group. So, starting with these messy, messy people, we realized that the people that are guiding this community are generally the people who show up. It's the same with this EMF camp community. The people who show up are your leaders. They are the people that you offer trust and respect to, and then you invest in order to grow them through their rough spots, grow them into great leaders, and grow them into humans who are comfortable offering back trust and respect and power and growing the next generation of leaders. So we've found in this Kubernetes, in this great project of Kubernetes, that we spent a lot of time with culture and making sure that the clean culture foundation that we laid gave us the structure that we needed to layer governance on top of it. But the culture was the foundation that you needed, and that was one of trust and respect. Those hand raisers, those people that show up and say, oh, I can do it, those are the people that you invest in. If you can empower those people, if you give them the respect and trust as the foundation, and then invest in them as leaders, that is something that through that reciprocity hack, they will want to give back into the community and continue to grow. So enthusiasm isn't always positive. This was something that we found in the Kubernetes community, was we actually spent a lot of time with the people who came and complained as well. Because if you are spending that much effort, if you have the energy and the drive to come to a meeting or to come to an event and say, here are all the things that are wrong, then you can turn that energy into something that makes this space or the community or the event better by empowering them to make change. Bringing them in, calling them into the community to make sure that you are engaging with that enthusiasm. Because the thing that you need most in these communities is the effort and the internal drive to keep work moving forward. In this, you end up growing leaders, and those leaders end up being your social proof in the future. The people who are super excited, whether it's with a little bit of a grump or super positive, they're the people that draw your next generation of leaders together. They're the people that bring the followers along. They're the people that speak about the culture and the community and the project, and in fact, deliver the next pieces of work that need to happen, whether it's getting tents put up or making sure that your next release comes out on time. So that investment, again, offering first respect and trust and then leadership to those people, encourage them to give back. There's another piece of this culture that is super important, which is developing values that you all can use to make decisions. I put an asterisk here because it's not sort of the squishy values of we value trust and integrity. It's the hard values of we find the community to be, and the community's decision making to be more important than a company that you might be working for. So within Kubernetes, we spent a lot of time developing values that allowed us to make decisions. If we had to make a decision between centralizing power and distributing power, because our values were set to distribution versus centralization, we knew what the decision would be. We knew that if we were making one-off processes, that we were doing something wrong. We needed to find a way to automate something. So with these values that are set to help you make the hard decisions later, not to signal any sort of positive political statements, but to make decisions, that was incredibly helpful. It took us about 2 years to solidify these values, but I knew that we had found them when I was at a conference, one of the KubeCons, where we had 8,000 people. It had been almost twice as many as the previous year. And in that, I saw in the social spheres, I saw the community showing those values by creating new user groups to make sure that we were bringing people together across our company boundaries. I saw people talking about and pushing forward ways to engage with the software and encourage people to learn about the software automation and processes that we had and bring people in to help. All of this, building the community, making sure that we had a distributed power structure, developing constant improvement, and also making sure that we had ways to automate the work that we were doing gave me great faith that these values were baked into that culture deep down. Another piece of this that is incredibly important is making sure that you reward the values and the behaviors that you want to encourage. This is really simple in some cases and really subtle in others. One of my favorite tricks for years was to handwrite thank you notes to people and send them to their corporate addresses. They did eventually always find their way to the person that I was writing to, but it was astonishing to find how many people thought that a little piece of paper that just said thank you for all your work was so much more important and so much more gratifying than an email or even a shout out on a video conference call. We did all of that as well, but finding ways that are novel to reward the behaviors you want to see are really important. People remember when they are thanked. People remember when they are rewarded. And that doesn't have to look like anything fancy. For one of our awards, we literally gave people buckets with a piece of wood in it. And that was the Chopping Wood and Carrying Water Award, because we wanted people to have work done that was not glamorous and to be rewarded for doing that work. So we gave away these silly little buckets, and people loved them. They felt very seen. They felt very engaged with and very rewarded for it. Was this a huge monetary investment for the community? No. Was it something that they put on their shelf behind them in video conferences? Actually, yeah. It was a silly piece of wood, but it worked. Another thing that we spend a lot of time working on was making sure that you were raising others. This isn't about making me the center of any attention. It's really about making sure that I share the information that I have, share the skills that I have, and help others grow into the next roles. My proudest moment in the Kubernetes community after setting up the initial set of governance was to watch the first generation, the first handoff of leadership to a point where I wasn't a leader anymore and I got to step back. That was one of my proudest moments. Being able to say, this isn't about me, this is about the community living on, is such an important piece of this. We instilled this in a way that was very intentional so that we were always bringing up underrepresented minorities, people who showed up to help, and people who were from the non-traditional path into software. We found that they made some of the best leaders in the community. They were much more able to be engaged and empathetic and open to new solutions, which leads to the empathizing. This is empathy and sympathy as one of the influence hacks. If someone feels that you are participating with them directly, if you are engaging with them and where they are coming from to whatever this problem is, this helps you find a way to bring them forward in whatever your need is. Again, it makes them want to invest in that community and invest in that software. All of this includes empathizing with your customers, empathizing with the people who will be using your software, and making sure they feel heard and engaged with, and understand when the software works and doesn't work for their needs. We spent a lot of time also making space for creative solutions and for fun, because if you don't have fun in these communities, you don't bind them together nearly as tightly as you could. We found fun in a number of ways. There were special interest groups that had particular hat days, and so when you'd go to a meeting, you'd all be wearing funny hats in a meeting. You'd We found this as something where we had special interest groups made to do social things at events. So when we would have particular physical events to bring us all together, people would mockingly make a special interest group to go bouldering when we were in particularly rocky areas or mountainous areas. We had people invest in the creative and fun and quirky aspects and show those parts of their personalities as part of the community. Again, rewarding that because it allows them to feel more a part of something more completely. This community does this remarkably well. It has been so fun to watch over the last 2 days. And then, of course, we have sort of the foundation, right back to the foundation of how you engage with any large-scale distributed community. You're going to communicate way more than you ever thought you needed to, saying something 100 times in 100 different channels, twisting it up, thinking you've told absolutely everyone what they needed to know, and then I guarantee someone will not have heard it, will not know this thing that seems patently obvious, and you have to continue and continue and continue to engage with that. This means that you find people who like telling these stories, who like sharing about the project or the community or what we need in the community, and use those people, reward them for communicating it, even if you're tired of hearing it. And fundamentally, we end up in a spot where what we build together is so much bigger than the basics of any one of us, what any one of us could build, or even one small group. We need to build these large-scale communities to make change, but we need to do it in a way that speaks to the individuals that are really participating so that they can be the leaders that they are learning to become and growing, and then they can grow the next generation and the next generation of leaders, because none of us in any position of leadership is going to be here forever. And Lord knows I'm tired, so I love that there are the next generations of leaders ahead. I think Kubernetes at this point is on their 4th generation of leaders, maybe their 5th. And that to me is so much fun to watch from a distance. It's our 10th anniversary here on June 6th, which is going to be great fun. And there's going to be a whole bunch of excitement from the community on the internet and in regional locations. So if you've been part of this community in any way, thank you so much for the investment. And thank you so much for your participation to make this industry shift. Have a great day and enjoy UMF Camp. Thanks.